Not everyone is born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Not many people are born into financial security. And quite frankly, even fewer stumble onto it. The rest of us have to work toward financial security. The one strategy that is commonly used is to play it safe. The question that many people ask is, why not just put aside some money now, stick it in fixed deposits where it's very, very safe, and trust a bank to take care of our money? And after all, money is going to grow as well. Let's talk about education planning. Let's assume you want to accumulate 250,000 ringgit in 10 years to educate your child in a local private university. Let's assume you've got 30,000 ringgit to begin with, and you're going to set aside 1,000 ringgit a month for the next 10 years. Work it out. How much money would you set aside over this long period of time? Each year, as you well know, has got 12 months. 1 decade, 10 years, has got 120 months. So since you're putting aside 1,000 a month, that means over the full period, you'd have set aside 120,000 plus your original capital of 30,000 ringgit. So that comes to 150,000 ringgit. In a fixed deposit, that kind of program would generate 183,000 ringgit. If, on the other hand, you take 30,000 ringgit to begin with and you pump that on a regular basis every month, 1,000 ringgit, into a typical equity fund with an assumed yield of 10% a year, your money actually grows to 288,411 ringgit. And you might actually be in the happy situation of being able to tell your child 10 years from now, not only have I set aside enough money for your whole degree, but we've actually got a little bit of extra cash which we can use to go on holiday, or maybe I can put a down payment on a brand new car for you. I'm pretty sure your child will be most grateful. So now let's talk about retirement planning, which is a very serious subject. What about retirement? Well, most people would say that they've got their EPFs, that's more than sufficient. Unfortunately, reports and studies have shown that EPF money is not going to last too many people too much time when it comes to retirement. Why is that? Because of inflation. Let me give you a case in point, one that is very, very close to home. Not many years ago, 1 ringgit could buy 2 cups of kopi in a coffee shop. Today, in the same coffee shop, the terrible fiend, Mr. Inflation, ensures that you only, well, you can't afford 2 cups. In fact, if you run the numbers, you'll find that you can't even afford 1 cup. That's how bad inflation is. So unless we plan for it, you're going to end up very thirsty and possibly hungry in retirement. So if you need 5,000 ringgit, let's say, to live on in retirement, 5,000 ringgit per month that is, and if your personal inflation rate is running at 5% a year, then in 15 years, you will need 10,394 ringgit to buy what 5,000 ringgit can buy today. Now, if you think you're going to retire at the age of 60 and you'll live to about 80 years, that's about 20 years in retirement, trust me, if you crank the numbers, you'll find that you probably need about 2.5 million ringgit in the bank before you retire in 15 years. Now, I want you to think about this. If each of these Tupperware brick things represent 500,000 ringgit, you're going to require 2.5 million to fully fund your retirement of 20 years duration. Now, that's a lot of money. And most people are never going to be able to accumulate this kind of money in the absence of a plan. I'm not even sure if you can still see me, but this is an enormous amount of cash. So let's move this out of the way. But this represents your requirement in retirement. Let's say 2.5 million ringgit. 500,000, 1 million, 1.5, 2 million, and 2.5 million. Now, how are you going to get closer to funding this huge amount of cash? Let's assume that you can save 2,000 ringgit each month by scrimping and cutting all unnecessary expenses. Your cumulative investments would come to about 362,000 ringgit. Let's say you decide to put the money in fixed deposits in a bank. After 15 years, you would have 472,579 ringgit, just under 500,000. On the other hand, if you were to do exactly the same thing, set aside 2,000 ringgit every month and you do so for 15 years, a typical equity fund with an assumed yield of 10% a year will give you about 850,000 ringgit. So while he didn't reach his target at 2.5 million ringgit, at least the investment in the representative equity fund yielded almost twice as much money as he would have received if he kept the money just in the bank. While he didn't reach his targeted retirement fund of 2.5 million ringgit, at least his investment in the representative equity fund yielded almost twice as much as he would have got by putting his money in a bank. Clearly, you can't hope to achieve financial security by just putting your money in the bank. If you have the time, experience, and knowledge, you can choose to invest directly in the stock market. However, if you're like most people, busy with your work and having very little time to spare for doing investment research, then using unit trusts as an investment vehicle is a viable option. Having said that, it's important you choose a unit trust advisor who has the tools and knowledge to be able to manage and monitor your investments well. Return is always a function of risk. However, your risk can be reduced by investing regularly. Perhaps it's time for you to think about retirement. Perhaps it's time even for you to think about how to give your children the best possible education. Remember, life will always contain an element of chance. Not to win is not a sin, but not to try is a tragedy. There's no reward without risk. If you have never missed when investing, you've not been in there trying.